good to maybe go. Sorry. All right. So, oh no, come on. Bear with me. I'm sorry. All right. So we should be. All right. We're good. We're good.
Perfect.
All right. It was me. All right. Awesome. So, hey guys, what's up? If you're new here, my name is Jordan. If you're not, welcome back. I am the owner of Boss Life in Progress, which is a career and confidence coaching company. And I just work with millennials in order to help them thrive and not just survive in their career. Today, we have a very special guest, and I will let him introduce himself because I know he can talk about himself way better than I can. So I want to start off with the dreaded interview question that no one likes. Tell me about yourself.
Well, it helps me that nobody likes it because it's definitely the hardest question to answer. So my name is Jason Sandmann. I am from Atlanta, Georgia, still born and raised. Go Braves, real quick for anybody who might be watching. I'm 43 years old. I almost lied and said I was 42, but we'll go with the right age. And I've been somebody who worked in the restaurant industry for most of my life, and now in the last couple have been pivoting to do financial coaching and then like life mindset coaching for people who work in the restaurant industry as well. I feel like that's an underserved kind of market for people who are looking for a little bit of space and or some clarity and direction in their lives. Beyond that, I'm just a simple dude. I love to cook. Love to watch sports, play with dogs, and do all the normal things. I would say I love to date, but that's not always accurate. But yeah, just like to have a good time and try to improve people's lives.
Awesome. And so I definitely want to get into the service industry and kind of like what you've gone through. So tell me a bit more about your experience in the service industry, front of house, back of house.
So I'm a front of house guy. I've done pretty much every position in the front of house that you can. I started off years and years ago as a part-time server and then started doing some hosting. Discovered I really enjoyed that aspect of it and had an office job that I was working at the same time that I did not like and was just kind of drawn into the business from there. And then I went actually from hosting to doing like office management. And then I was GM for a couple places and then just kind of switched from management to serving to bartending to pretty much anything that I could do depending on who I was working with and where I was working. And kind of lived every cliche that one in the industry lives. I definitely lived the party lifestyle for way longer than I should have, and struggled with self-identity and making ends meet for all of that time, and always loved it, but never could quite find what my particular path was, like how I wanted to get to the next stage of my life. I always had that goal where I wanted to own one day, but I didn't really know how to do that. And so I was just kind of putting one foot in front of the other and serving people as best I could, but not really knowing where it was leading, if that makes sense.
Definitely. It's funny you say that, putting one foot in front of the other, just, like on a daily basis, because I recently wrote a post on Instagram and it was talking about floating and how sometimes when we don't have like that path or purpose or whatever you want to call it, we tend to float in life. And it sounds like you were having a good time, but also kind of struggling with that. So can you talk a little bit more about how you were, you said you were having fun, but it was kind of hard because you were kind of on that paycheck to paycheck cycle?
Yeah, for sure. So, anybody who has lived that lifestyle for a long time can attest that even when you're having fun, you're not always having fun. And I definitely, like, my income was all over the place when I was in the industry. When I started, I wasn't making very much. At one of my GM jobs, I was making $70,000, $80,000 a year. And then I went back down, and usually was averaging like that 40 to 50. But I was never in control of my money. And it was really challenging, like, especially when you're working in the service industry, there are a few reasons why that ends up happening. If you're getting cash all the time, the cash just has that way of burning its way through your wallet. Mm-hmm. But, early on in my career, I was married, and we were completely living beyond our means, not really sure how we were going to do anything. And then we started kind of working our way out of that, and then started, doing a couple other things. And then we ended up splitting, and then I went right back in. Like, I was pretty much debt free once she and I split, and then went right back into the lifestyle, and was really on my own for the first time as an adult at that point, and went right back into debt. And yeah, it's really, really challenging, because you start to feel like that's just what life has to offer you, right? Like, you don't really see a way out of it. Mm-hmm. And I struggled with that a lot. And if anybody else who has been out there in the service industry, like, I loved what I did. I was very good at taking care of people and, being really present for the experience. But I didn't always have a lot of confidence in how I would express that to others, right? Like, I always felt, well, I'm just a server, or I'm just a bartender, or whatever the case may be. There's not as much when I was managing and doing that stuff, but still, it was just like, if you would meet anybody, you almost felt like you had to apologize for your career, right? Mm-hmm. And that was really, really taxing on me for a very long time, because I just kind of made that my identity and made it something that I was apologizing for, without having anybody have to actually, like, put me in that position. I was putting myself in that box.
And so why did you feel like you needed to apologize? Was it the job, or was it something else behind the job?
Probably both, right? Like, there's that definite kind of feel is like, I'm not fulfilling my potential, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I don't think anybody needs to leave the service industry if they love it there, right? I think it's actually one of the highest callings that you can have if you're bringing people enjoyment all the time and you're really focused on service. That's what we're all here for. But there's that perception of what the external pressure is. And, like, a lot of people will have that from their parents. A lot of people will have it just from society in general. It's that, like, a big question to a lot of people who are in, it's like, well, what are you doing this, or like, what are you working towards while you're working here? Like, are you in school or something else? There's always that kind of just unspoken inference that you should be doing something more. And if you're like me, you also have that on the inside too, or where, like, you just feel like you're not quite, like, that something inside isn't really fulfilling your potential. And it's very easy to externalize that as, it's my job that is making me feel that way, when most of the time it's actually just us who are making us feel that way. But that's not always a distinction we're ready to make.
No, I definitely agree. I think that internalized pressure you're talking about, I'm sure people feel it from service to even all these technical jobs where you can be making like $200,000, and it's just that, and it's internal and external pressure, because I feel like like when I was in college, I was a waitress, and I, because of where I was in life, I didn't really have a problem with being like, yeah, I'm a waitress, because like you said, I'm in school, I'm doing something in the meantime, but people aren't giving themselves enough credit, because I know, being any front of the house, I mean, back of the house is hard too, but anything waitress, even people that like bus tables, or people that do hosting, it is such a tough job, because you have to deal with so many people, so many personalities, and just, it's crazy. And actually, back when I used to have not used to, it's still there, but my blog used to be all about like adulting and basically getting through adulthood. And that was before I kind of narrowed it down to career stuff. But I wrote an article, and it was, I think it was like the 7 or 5 things I learned while being a waitress. And I learned so many people skills, communication. And one of the things I don't know if I wrote it down, but one of the things that I did learn is kind of a little bit is money management. And can you kind of speak to, you said you have cash and it's burning a hole in your pocket and you're living this lifestyle. Can you talk a little bit about how you got debt free? Because I know we're going to talk about your other debt free journey later, but the first time you got debt free and then how you kind of got back into the partying space.
Yeah. So the first time that I went through that journey with my then wife, like we together definitely made enough to live on and survive, and we definitely could have been doing some things better, but we did not pay attention at all. We had no idea what those skills were, right? And all I knew, like for me, I was good with money because I was never late with my bills. Like I was always able to meet my obligations. I could at least make the minimum payments on my credit cards, and I thought like, okay, I'm doing okay. And I guess in some ways I was fine. Like when I was in college, I remember having like a couple times where that wasn't the case, and I had debt collectors call, and like that scarred me, right? Like I never wanted that phone call again. And I never wanted to borrow money from, like, credit cards were not borrowing money in my mind at that point, but never wanted to borrow from family, never wanted to do that. But we would go out and we would go travel and do all these other things, and we were just kind of drowning, and it just didn't make any sense. And I didn't know about the debt snowball at that point, but I kind of started working the debt snowball, which is something that we'll probably discuss in depth in a little bit. But like where I just really started trying to picking one of my debts and really just focusing on minimums on the others and just trying to pay as much as I could towards that one to get that card and payment out of my life so I could then, go on to the next one. And it had taken a long time because I wasn't sacrificing a lot to make it happen. I was just at this point, it was when we had pretty good income. So whatever we had that was extra, we could kind of go and throw to it. And I say we, but we were one of those couples where our finances were pretty separate, although they were also together at the same time, right? Like we never had a problem, like, helping or making sure that things were equitable and fair, or like if one person needed to pay, like that was never an issue communication wise, but we never really combined everything. We never really communicated over what our shared goals were. We were just kind of letting life take us where it was going to take us. And so I knew I wanted to get out of debt at that point, but I didn't really know why I wanted to get out of debt. Like I didn't really, and so that's really the main reason why it didn't really stick once I did. As soon as I did, like I immediately pretty much went and got like a new car loan. And then when she and I split, like I was determined not to live with roommates. And so I went and moved out to this other place, and like, it's like, all right, well, I guess this month I'll put a little bit on there and hopefully, and then, before long it all built back up again because there was just no plan or like greater thing I was working towards. It was just trying to not feel the pressure of having bills coming at me was really the reason I had done it at first.
You talk about the why. Mm-hmm. And again, super important because sometimes we don't think about why we do things and we don't have a reasoning for doing things. And so you said your why was just kind of getting bills out of the way. What, at hindsight being 2020, what do you think your why would or could have been to make you kind of snap out of it and really start managing your money?
Oh man, like if I would have just understood that like if I could have understood that people who are good with money don't get that way when they get a lot of money, like that you've got to manage what you have. Like that would have been everything. If I would have understood that it was completely possible for me to actually build wealth and work in the service industry, a lot of people don't think retirement is even an option for them. 100% not true. If you are working at the right jobs and if you're being intentional with it. I was at that point in my life living completely without any hope for the future. Didn't really know what I wanted. Like I had battles with depression for much of my teen life and then most of my 20s. And I had really started convincing myself that like for me to find any sort of happiness or for me, like I just had to be okay with less.
Okay.
And while I think that there is validity to attaching our, like, understanding that material things aren't going to bring us happiness, and that there are some things that we can do to minimal to kind of be a little bit more of a minimal lifestyle and still be really great. I had taken that to a really wrong degree. I kind of took it to that was all I was ever going to be able to do, and it was a self-worth thing. It was just like I wasn't going to push for anything because I didn't believe I could really make it. There was no belief in self.
Wow. And that's actually a great segue, because I think mindset is so key. And it's so, I mean, at first, when I first started like my coaching journey, I was like, I don't need the mindset. I can do it. It's fine. But when I really sat down and sorry, I'm trying to fix this. When I sat down and actually was trying to come up again with my why and come up with, why am I trying to help people get jobs? Why am I trying to help people believe they can get jobs? I had to actually believe in myself, just like you needed to believe in yourself. And it's, we call it woo-woo. I don't know if you've heard that term.
Yes, I definitely fight the woo-woo sometimes, for sure.
And people are like, no, I just want to know, like, tell me how to debt snowball, tell me how to zero base, but tell me exactly the specific tactics. I'm like, well, like we can, you can tell them that, or I can tell them how to write their resume, but if they don't believe that they can go for bigger and better opportunities, or in your case, they don't believe that they can be financially savvy, it's not really going to stick.
Yeah. And
so good segue into mindset and money mindset. And so when you were kind of at that place where you were saying, I didn't really believe that I could achieve more or do more, how did you kind of start moving yourself out of that mindset?
Yeah. So before I get to that, I just kind of want to reinforce your point. Like, mindset's really everything in how we're going to live our life. And I had understood that in some ways, but really didn't. And I'm a financial coach because I feel like that's a good way to give people some tangible results. But the space I really like to play in is that life and mindset, because that's the real work, right? Like that's changing, understanding that we have the power to decide what we believe about ourselves, about those around us. Like, it literally is the secret sauce to everything. So I'm so grateful that you've found that on your own journey, and that you're bringing that to others. And hopefully that's what I'm going to be doing as well. As far as when mine started to switch. So I don't know if I have a particular rock bottom, right? Like, I think I had like 2 or 3 kind of along the way. The first, and this, if I tear up, I apologize. The first one that really hit me was I had a cat that was like the best cat of all time, right? And she and I had her for like 10 years or whatever. She was the messiest thing. She took after her owner. She was a mess all the time. She was super, super neurotic, but she was so sweet. And she was living in my apartment with me. She was an indoor cat, and she had fleas. And I was like, I was scared to death to take her to the vet, because I knew that I was getting close to, like, not having room on car stuff. So I just was scared to death. I didn't think fleas were that big of a deal. And like, she had them for a while, and we just went on doing our thing. Well, she ended up getting really sick at one point, and I had to take her, and she died. And throughout my life, I don't really cry much at like the traditional things that you're supposed to cry about. Like, there are movies and songs that will do it, but usually like it's hard for me to kind of shed a tear, even though I'm a pretty vulnerable and emotional guy. I bawled when that happened. I like just lost it. And that was just a direct reflection of the situation I was in. I was just so scared to face. At that point, I had no idea like what my financial debts were. Like, I just I couldn't face them. And, but that didn't really, like, that happened, and it was super sad. Didn't really do a lot to change my behavior at that point. I got into a new relationship, and it was great for a while. And then that really started getting strained, and there are a lot of reasons why it didn't work out. And there are two people who were involved in that story, but I try out of any relationship that I have to know what I'm bringing to the table and what I can learn from the experience. And what it was that living without hope was really, really draining on her. Like, why, when you're in a relationship with somebody, like if you're with somebody who's given up, like what's attractive about that, right? Mm-hmm. And I was carrying a lot of that because I just didn't know what I wanted to do. And the way she would approach it was very confrontational, so it didn't jive very well. So it still didn't sit for a second. But after I moved, like she and I split and I moved out, I moved to Dallas, which is like an hour away from Atlanta, and not at all the area I wanted to be, but it was super cheap rent. And I finally started going to therapy again. I had gone before and then it stopped because I couldn't afford it, but made it a priority and just realized I was tired. I was really, really tired of feeling so down. And I wasn't an alcoholic in the traditional sense that you think of, or at least not that I think of, right? Like I was never really, didn't really drink to get drunk that often. Certainly made some bad decisions around it. But, whenever I didn't feel like it was fine for me to stop. So I didn't really think I had a problem. But, during that time in my life, there were nights where I was choosing, well, can I afford to go and get something to eat or can I go and get a beer? And there were plenty of nights when I went and did the beer, which would sometimes lead to the drugs and everything else. Like, it was just so, I had to take a big look in the mirror and be like, is this sustainable? Is this what I want my life to be? Right. And finally I started kind of looking for some ways out of that situation. And, the first real big thing that changed things for me, maybe not first, but one of the big things was, since I had that, I was still working in Atlanta, even though I lived in Dallas, an hour away. And that drive sucked, but I started looking at it as an opportunity to learn. So I started like looking for some podcasts and looking to see what I could do. And eventually Google was like, okay, well, I got to see what my debt number really is. Like, what am I actually really facing? And I find that most of the time, I mean, it was a big number, but once you start facing those monsters in your closet that you're avoiding, usually they're not as scary as you think they are. And the first kind of resource that I found that really started helping me get my mindset changed around money was Dave Ramsey. And there are a lot of things that I'm not necessarily in lockstep with Mr. Ramsey on, but I wouldn't be where I am today without what he was teaching. And I'm eternally grateful for his ministry and how he serves, because it just gave me some basic fundamental goals to shoot for.
Right.
And when you're talking about your mindset, or when you're talking about getting your money right, or any of that, it's really learning how to create goals for yourself and how to do all of that, right? Like, and it's just how to determine what life you want to live. And one of the big keys from that is you start happening to your life rather than letting life happen to you.
Oh,
you switch on, you start doing something with intention. And that was really where my journey started to change.
Wow. You definitely made several good points. I think just hearing your story is going to be great for someone that is where you are right now, and they're going to say to themselves, how can I get out of this? Because at some point, and that's one of the things that I'm really trying to push, is we don't want to wait until we hit rock bottom or even get close to there to make the change.
Yeah.
Change is going to be uncomfortable, whether you're down here or up here. And it just, as long as you are putting yourself into it, like you said, intentionally, and being proactive in your life, I think it's going to be difficult, but it's going to be less difficult. And I love the fact in your story that even though you kind of hit rock bottom a couple times, it finally shook you awake. And one of the things really quickly that I wanted to ask you about, what, if you remember, what podcasts were you listening to? Because I listen to podcasts on the way to work too. I try not to listen to, if I do listen to music, it's maybe like once a week, but I try the rest of the days to listen as I go to work.
Yeah. So back then it was a lot of Dave Ramsey. He does like 3 hours a day of his radio show, and I would literally listen to all of it. just trying to kind of get that motivation. The Lewis Howes podcast, I just lost the name of it, but he's got a great one with some really good School of Greatness. That's definitely one of my favorites. There are the life coach school was one before I even knew I wanted to get into coaching. That was one I remember a very specific episode I listened to, and I was like, oh, this all makes total sense. And it's all around that mindset thing, right? So those were a couple of the good ones. Now I vary it up a lot of times now, and so many of them are kind of on like the financial side, and I'm sorry that I don't remember some of the names of the others, but I know the Choose FI podcast is one that I listen to now, but for people who are seeking financial independence, and that one's a good one for like tips and tricks. But I kind of go everywhere. Like YouTube is another great resource. I'm working with a coach, my own coach right now, to kind of help on some of my goals. And she just recently had me like revisit like the old Les Brown YouTube videos, and Jim Rohn, who's one of my favorites. And those are so full of truth that like it's one of those where those are the go-tos in my rotation.
Nice. I really enjoyed podcasts. I think that branching out, it's always good to kind of listen to the big names. I have my own qualms, not specifically about Dave Ramsey, but kind of the process, the steps and everything. Is like rice and beans and rice. And I'm like, I'm too bougie for that. So, but I think that he has, when it comes to setting goals, he's very like strict and with his goals. And I definitely think that goal setting on top of mindset is really going to get you into a financial space that'll work for you.
Yep.
And so, speaking of tips and tricks, let's get into some tactics that kind of work for you. So you talked about debt snowball, and we also, before this, we talked about zero-based budgeting, right? Yep. Okay, so let's talk about which one makes sense first.
So really to start, it's probably good, like, I'm going to go back to Ramsey for a second, and then it's the last time we kind of have to mention it, because when you start really like digging into it, like again, he's great for basics, and then there's a lot of branching out of opinions over there, and people can follow. Personal finance is just that, it's personal, so you find the one that means something to you, for sure. But Ramsey has something where he calls the 7 baby steps, and really for people who are just trying to get a grip, it's the first 3 that you want to deal with. And that is build an emergency fund of $1,000 is step 1. Just get money in the bank that you don't have going anywhere else that's yours. A lot of people just have never even done that. Then it's getting rid of all consumer debt besides your house. There are people who disagree that that's the number one goal, but in general, you want to avoid making payments, especially interest payments on anything. Like you want to live within your means. So that's the next one. And then step 3 is building up that emergency fund to 3 to 6 months of income. So, but he does approach all of that. And a lot of people approach all of that from that traditional budgeting mindset, right? Somebody's got a salary. They know they're making $50,000 a year. They know they're going to get a paycheck on the 1st and the 15th for this amount of money. And they can plan kind of accordingly and budget from that. I didn't have a lot of success with that when I was.
Right. I was going to ask, I was like, how does that work with someone who's in the service industry where your money is not normal all the time, basically?
Yeah, it's incredibly hard. And that's where zero-based budgeting comes in. And so that was one of the next resources that I really found was there's a budgeting service I use. It's youneedabudget.com. I'm not affiliated with them in any way, but it is the app that I use. The community ends up calling them YNAB. And they're all about zero-based budgeting, and they've got their own kind of 4 rules that they talk about, but it comes down to you're only budgeting the money that you have. Okay. That's all you can do. And when you've got other money that comes in, you go ahead and put that in the budget right away, and you decide right then when you get it what you want that money to go towards. Okay. And that makes it so if you start to really quickly see where your values are. Because at first, most people who start doing that, you're really just expense tracking. You're just kind of seeing like where your money's going. Mm-hmm. But then once you really start getting into the spirit of it, what you're doing is you're being intentional and you're saying, okay, I've got to make this, like I've got rent coming up. So, I just got $1,000 on this check. I need to have $500 going towards the rent. I need to have $200 going towards food. And I want to, put $300 towards insurance, whatever else. And I've got no money for fun. Well, then when you want to go out and you have to go and spend that money and you look at that budget and you don't have anything in there, you've got to take it from somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to decide, well, what is more important to me in this moment? My impulse?
I guess I don't have to eat.
Yeah. My impulse, or what I'm trying to save for and what I've said was important to me, like what I decided. And it's a hard process at first, right? Like it's especially hard. The big one for most people when they start doing that is the eating category, either groceries or dining out. We all spend way more than we realize on that. For me, it was definitely beer and booze. Was like I saw how much I was spending and what I was taking away from it. And those conversations, it seems so silly that I would like fight myself for $8. But like even if I wasn't going out, if I was just going home and I just wanted to get a 6-pack, and I was like, well, I didn't put that I wanted to spend any money on booze this week. Like, I'm okay if I'm going to do this, but what am I taking it from? Like, what is it? What is this worth to me? And so slowly I started saying more often, no, I can wait until another day for that. I can wait, another week until I get some more money in and I decide what I'm going to do. And that was just on like a normal, getting paid. I think at that point I was getting paid weekly schedule. I can't tell you how much better it is for cash. Like right now I work like while I'm trying to get the coaching business where I want it to be, I'm doing a side hustle. So my income's still inconsistent. And I do like a couple different side hustles, and one of them's like cash based. Before I even leave the store, I'm in my budget and I'm putting that money in, and I'm like, okay, where is this going? Because if I don't do that, then I'm going to go around and, well, why don't I go ahead and eat out tonight? Or why don't it becomes your roadmap. And then you start like realizing it's like, okay, well, you get that $1,000 saved and you're like, oh, well, it feels good to have that in there. It's like, what else can I start putting this money to? And like what? And so when I started all of that, as I said, I was close to $40,000 in debt and wasn't making more than 40 or 45 a year. And in 2 years, I was able to reduce that to just over 5.
Nice. Okay.
And it was just for making different choices. Like that was the only thing that really, I mean, I definitely would pick up shifts because, I was working towards a goal, but it was because I had a goal and I had an idea of what I wanted my money to do for me. And I had, as we talked about earlier, that why. And when you start working with zero-based budget, or any budget really, but for me, zero-based budgeting was what made it all click. Like that's just the biggest tool in the arsenal of, oh man, like I can actually do this. Like I can start to see some traction. I can start to, make a little bit of a difference. And it just requires having a different conversation with myself, sacrificing some short-term pleasure sometimes for a long-term goal, because I've decided what really matters to me.
So what do you say to people that say, well, it's easy for you to say, Jason, you've done it and you've succeeded at it, but when I tried to budget, I couldn't. And I don't know how to build these habits. What do you say to them?
I say that that's a belief that they might believe that about themselves, but they can change that belief, that they don't have to be married to it. And that maybe zero-based budgeting the way I do it isn't the method for them, but there is a method for them, right? Sometimes when you get to people who are on paycheck to paycheck, like sometimes it's a shovel to hole ratio, right? Like sometimes you just have more expenses than you have income coming in. We briefly touched on back of house earlier, right? Like so many people who work back of house, they don't have the tip fluctuations that we had in the front, but they're not making a lot of money. Like and sometimes that leads to, well, I've got to work an extra job for a while. That's where the beans and rice stuff from Ramsey will come in. Like sometimes it leads to, well, I need to make some different choices about what I'm going to do for my career, or I need to figure out like how I can reduce my lifestyle. But you can do it. Like if I can go from where I was in where I thought my life could go to the belief I have now of where it can go, then it's not impossible for anybody. Because I was as close to having had given up as you could be.
Got you. Okay. That's awesome. I think, as you're saying, it's like building habits. It's like working out or eating healthy or any other habit. It's just something that you need to build. And for some people, and I always like to correlate it back to job searching, because I'm a career coach and that's what I do. Yeah. But you just have to kind of stay disciplined in a way that works for you. I know a lot of people, they'll Google like how to save money, and Google will tell them, okay, you have to put this amount of money away every month, and if you don't do it, you're a horrible person. And they start feeling like that, and you're like, and it's like, no, you're not a horrible person. You just need to build up these habits. And especially like you were saying, for someone who's living paycheck to paycheck and they're feeling like, I don't have any money to put away. Let's actually address that, because we kind of have been talking about that. So if, like you said, back of house, if you feel like you don't have any money to put away, what is kind of their first step? I know it's a budget, but what do they do second step then?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing you got to do is like make sure that you can survive, right? Like, and to go back and touch on something you were just saying, yeah, it's very important to remember, one, you're not a bad person, you're a person. Yeah. And this stuff is not easy. It's not hard, but it's not easy, right? Like, it requires a new way of thinking and becoming a new version of yourself. And that's scary. And you're not always going to be perfect at it. I'm still not perfect at it. I make mistakes with my goals and with my budget and stuff all the time. It is about incremental progress. It's about changing the narrative that you have with yourself. It's about not beating yourself up as much. When you're in that real place of struggle, the first thing you got to pay for food. Mm-hmm. You got to have shelter. You got to have transportation, and you got to have utilities that, like, you got to protect yourself. Your four walls is the most important thing.
Right.
There might be sacrifices you have to make in the short term to get out of that. As I said, like, I was convinced after, my marriage and then relationship, like, I didn't want to have roommates ever again. Mm-hmm. I didn't like that. Wasn't high on my priority list. I wanted to go live on. I couldn't afford it on what I was making. I had to make a different choice. With eating, I didn't like to cook. I didn't think I liked leftovers for forever. Like, now cooking's one of my like big passions, but like, I was convinced I couldn't do it. I was convinced that it was cheaper just to eat out for one than it was to go and make, like, I found whatever excuse I could find. Yep. You got to question what you think is right, and you got to see if there's something that does work for you that's different, right? Like, there are solutions out there that can fit into what your values are, and really starting to get a hang of that allows you to figure out what those values are. Like, so many of us just don't even really think of that. You just get caught, especially when you're paycheck to paycheck, especially when you're really struggling. You're just so worried about trying to make it to the next one, and you can't call out of work and you can't do anything. Like, you've just got to find some little small thing that you can try that's different. Because one thing that we both know is, if you keep doing the same stuff, you're going to get the same results. Like, one of the big shifts for me when I really started figuring all this out and living it was, your life is the sum of the choices you make. And if you don't like where you're at, you've got to make some different choices. And you got to practice forgiveness. You got to practice finding these other things. But really, it's just about stopping the narrative that you can't do it, because we've got so much more potential than we give ourselves credit for.
Agreed. I peruse Facebook groups just to kind of get a feel of like how people are feeling, like, in the market and everything. And I see so many people saying, I've got this going on, and this going on, and this going on, and there's no way I'm ever going to be able to make more money, manage my money, get a better job, this, that, and the other. And like you were saying, a part of what I do, mindset, I feel like a part of what really any coach does whether it be fitness, finance, career, whatever, it is mindset, and it's really big. And I hope that obviously finances are important, but I hope that in the future I can invite you back as the mindset coach you will be, and, so that we can really get to that. And people, and I will hammer it all day. It's not the sexy thing, but people, because people, like you said, want tangible results. They want the money, they want the job, they want this and that, and it's all going to feel great for 2 months, and then you're just going to let it fall to the wayside because you don't have your why, you don't have that mindset. And so, speaking of getting more money, better job, whatever you want to call it, let's talk about briefly what kind of skills did you learn in the industry that transfer well? Because a lot of people, even though you loved it, a lot of people want to get out of it.
Yeah.
And then we could talk about staying in it, but getting out of it, what kind of skills do you feel like you learned that would transfer well to other types of careers?
There are so many. Like, I honestly think everyone should at least spend some time in that sector for a little bit. I'll try to keep it somewhat brief. My favorite one, my favorite thing about the industry, and it's a skill that you can learn, is you have to learn to work together towards a common goal. You have to learn to work with people who have different ideas and different solutions. It is the best home for diversity that I have seen in any place. And if you allow it to, if you change your mindset and you don't look for reasons to not like other people, you get exposed to so many different viewpoints and cultures and potential solutions. It is the best place to learn to diversify your thinking and approach things from a different angle. So that's definitely my number one skill, I think, that transfers from it.
Yeah.
Another big one is the concept of mise en place. So you go talk to chefs, if you're at like any kind of like high end, like everybody's got to have their mise en place, and that just literally translates to everything in its place. Okay. And it's just about setting yourself up for success before you go into the stressful time. Cool. And when I started realizing that, I don't have to just do this at work, I can do it at home too. Like when you're trying to build a new habit or do any habit stacking, like journaling is a popular one, right? Mm-hmm. Put that by your bed where you know you're going to be. And so it's ready for you to go and you don't have to go and look for it. Like it's just these little acts of, if you're going back to meal prep, if you've got 3 doubles coming up or you've got something going on that you know is going to challenge you ahead of time, it's just that ability to embrace what's coming and make a plan to get around it rather than just, that's going to suck and then get to it anyway. Right. And like in your case, when you're talking about job searching, it's the same thing. It's like, okay, well, what are your barriers to going and finding that job? Like if it's a self-belief thing, what can you put in place that pumps you up to where you feel motivated to go do that? Like, who are you doing it for? Are you doing it for your family? Are you trying to do it for your son or your daughter? Like put the things in place to motivate you to do what you say that you want to do, or change what you say you want to do because you're not doing the actions to get there. So that's a big one. I had one other one here. My apologies. Oh, and you touched on this earlier, communication, right? Like it is it's probably the biggest flaw in every restaurant I've ever worked in. I've never been the one that they've mastered it. Mm-hmm. But it's also the biggest key to success, whether you're talking about the guest facing aspect of it and like trying to learn how to anticipate needs and read people without having to, or you're talking about saying as much in as little words as possible and still having this back and working as a team. Like that, those communication skills will play forward in whatever industry you go to, especially if you master how to actively listen and, try to put yourself in somebody else's shoes and come at it with solution-based win-win or win-win-win, how you're looking. Like that is a skill that will carry you through into any other industry that you ever go into.
I agree. There are people that want to, they want to be in leadership, management, supervisor, whatever you want to call it, roles, but their communication is horrid. And I'm like, you have to work on, especially if you want to lead and also even be a team player, your communication skills are a must, because it frustrates me when I see such a good such a good like person that's, you know, working with a person, and they're smart and they're intelligent, but their communication skills are just like, you have to get better. Like, we're gonna have to work on this, because in a world full of tech that's getting even more techier, we have a ton of people, or we're going to have a ton of people that we can run the computers and do all this, but we don't have enough people that know how to deal with people.
Yeah.
And they're either like super awkward, or they don't know how to like you said, put themselves in other people's shoes. They don't know how to have empathy, or they don't know how to have sympathy. It's just kind of, as we get more techie, we're kind of losing that. And I hope that we can still push that on to people. And I do think that being in the service industry would really help people just even learn. Because even as I really try not to be like a butt to my service staff, because I understand there were people that would go off on me because of some guacamole.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, we're busy. I will go get the guacamole. Calm down.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy. And so I want to briefly, because I know we're about at our time, I wanted to talk about, if you want to stay in the service industry, what are some things that you can do to, if like you love it, it's awesome, you're a people person, how can you stay there but also be true financially to yourself and make sure that your family and yourself are taken care of?
Yeah, it's it's definitely not always easy. Like, you've got to find a place that fits into your value system, and that you can also, make the kind of money that's going to do that. Like, if you have to make sacrifices to lifestyle, then you have to do that. Or if you just have to go work extra hours, or if you just happen to go find the job that might require a bit more of you, a little bit more knowledge, but also has the kind of more guaranteed income. And honestly, in 2021 and after 2020, everything's so much in flux right now. It's the hardest time I've ever seen for the industry. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what direction that's going to go. So this is really just more general advice, is whatever business that you want to stay in or be in, like, you just have to derive the value, like, from yourself. Like, you can't fill external plugs with, you can't fill internal holes with external plugs, right? Mm-hmm. Like, you have got to learn what it is that makes you tick, and to have really honest and authentic conversations with yourself about what you want to do and where you want to be, mm-hmm. and then choose a life and a career that's going to get you there. Yeah. And, a lot of people who stay with the service industry, they do it because it does offer a lot of flexibility in hours, and they can mm-hmm. take off whatever they want. Like, before all this happened and I decided to pursue this new path, like, I was completely convinced that one of the reasons I had chosen it was because these skills transfer anywhere. I could go and move to France and go and be a server somewhere, because it's just something that I know how to take care of people. So just figure out, like, what makes you happy. And so many people are scared to have that conversation, because once you define it, then what if you lose it, or what if you don't get it, right? Like, mm-hmm. once you realize that, like, everything that we want in our lives is controlled up here, well, then we're the ones we have to blame if we don't get it. And that's a really hard conversation. And I struggle with that still to this day, right? Like, it's not something that you just magically get better at, but you build different habits and that mise en place, you put things in place that fill your cup. So when the things get hard, like, you can get back to that and you can keep on building, and then just, find, it sounds so cheesy, but just find what you truly love and, like, what you want to do. And then just go do it. Go figure out how to make it work.
Yes. I find the cheesiest and the most cliche stuff, because we're all trying to be cool, and we're like, oh, that's cheesy and cliche. I'm like, that's what we should be doing. Like, no matter how cheesy or cliche, like, I always tell people, the live, laugh, love sign, and they're like, oh, that's basic. I'm like, what's wrong with living, laughing, and like, what's the problem?
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with being basic or cheesy or cliche. I know I use those words too, but I feel like there's nothing wrong with it. And I feel like you said, finding your why, making sure you're happy, addressing the fact that sometimes it is external things. It's just life. It's not fair, but it's a hard conversation when it's you, when you're the reason that you don't have the finances you want or the job you want, or you let your mindset kind of put you in a box. And that, like you said, that's a really tough conversation. And I'm sure we've all had moments where we're like, dang, I really could change this if I would just get out of my own way and out of my own head.
Yeah. Yeah, there are a couple things that brings it. Like, one, just real quick on happiness. Like, I think it's important to understand that happiness doesn't mean being happy all the time, right? Yeah. Like, it doesn't mean that like we're happiness without sadness. It doesn't mean anything. Like, we're meant to experience all that in life and just learn how to experience it and appreciate it for what it is. And yeah, sometimes externally, the world's going to come and knock you down. Mm-hmm. Like, there are times when things are not in your control. What is in our control is how we respond to it.
Yes.
And one of the big quotes that changed my life was Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. And it's just like, there's in between, now I'm going to mess it up, but in between the stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose. And then that choice is our freedom. Like, that's the freedom that we all have, is we get to decide how we're looking at the world. That woman who, was running you ragged for guacamole, maybe she's looking to go and be mean to everybody. Maybe she's just having a hard day.
Right.
At the end of the day, I can love her wherever she's at, right? Like, mm-hmm. I can go and she can make me mad, and I can, but like, that's not true. She can't make me mad. I can choose to be mad.
Right.
Right. Like, at the end of the day, it's all about how we decide to view the world. And that's including our circumstance. And that's why, like, every like super successful person that we follow and like our coaching journeys, they all have these origin stories where it was really, really hard. Right. Mm-hmm. Like, and that's what makes the triumph so much better, is because the struggle. And it's just figuring out what those little steps you can take, because it's all little steps. It's finding what you talked earlier about being uncomfortable, and you're going to be uncomfortable either way, right? Like, if you're just floating along and you're not happy with the way your life is, well, that's a kind of discomfort that I had for a long time. Now I actively seek discomfort, but by like challenging myself to do something that scares me or something that I don't know, because that's the way you grow, and that's the way that you experience all this life. So choose your discomfort. Right? Like, choose the way you want to go through it.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. No, that is great. And I think, obviously, don't want to go over time, so I think we're going to wrap it up there. But I want to say thank you so much for coming on, and to everyone watching live or watching the replay, make sure you guys go and check him out. And then where can we find you at?
So my website is outoftheweedscoaching.com. And there's an easy way to email me is just outoftheweedscoaching@gmail.com. I do have an Out of the Weeds Facebook group that I'm starting. I'm working on a couple other things as well. Hope to be doing a visioning workshop to help people find their why in the very near future. I should have mentioned that to you earlier. And I will pass it along. So if anybody's interested in doing that, I'll open that up to the public pretty soon. But yeah, I would love to see. It's Jason Sandmann on Facebook. There aren't too many Jason Sandmann around. So me a note, and I'd be glad to help however I can. I'm here to serve.
Okay. And you give free discovery calls, correct?
Yeah, for anybody who wants to go through a coaching session with me, the first one is definitely going to be just free. It's all about really figuring out what you're dealing with and listening to you. So much about our finances, we're scared to talk to somebody. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't have to be finance. It's just like, and I'm here just to listen. And so for, an hour, we can sit and chat, and if it makes sense for us to work together in a bigger context, we can discuss that. But if it's just something where I can give you a little bit of hope or a little bit of a push towards something you want to go, then I'm happy to help however I can. So yeah, a free discovery call is definitely on offer if anybody wants to go there, and you can schedule that in the website.
Awesome. Well, I will go ahead and put The things that we mentioned in the live and also all of his social media and website, I'll put that down in the description of this video once it finishes rendering. And then I'll also give you the link as well. But again, thank you so much. And just so you guys know, this week has been all about finances, making sure that you're thriving and not just surviving. And I want you guys to remember that we've been talking about this the whole time. It's about mindset, because without it, your tactics are only going to take you so far, and you're not going to have enough of a reason why to continue. So, Jason, again, thank you so much. And I will definitely have you back when you're a full-blown mindset coach. And I will just leave it at that. We are good to go. And so thank you guys. And I will catch you guys on my next segment of Is It Friday Yet?
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.